Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. We hope you are doing well. We're happy to have so many participants today. This confirms how important these online sessions are for us to stay connected and keep developing our businesses in spite of the current circumstances. This event is presented to you by investHorizon in collaboration with the European Business and Innovation Centres Network. investHorizon is an EU project supported by the European Commission and Eureka. We're here today with Dr. Connie Weber. She's Head of Research and Innovation at the European Crowdfunding Network. The goal of this webinar is to help you understand how you may use crowdfunding as an alternative form for innovation and how it can be complementary to traditional forms of financing. The webinar will be available for replay on our website, investhorizon.eu, where you can also find all our past webinars and online classes. I also encourage you to register to our community so you can be informed of all upcoming opportunities. Our next webinar is already open for registration. It will be on April 23rd. A quick update on our accelerator program. investHorizon will select a new cohort of companies to join the accelerator on May 20th. So if you are an entrepreneur in a deep tech sector currently seeking a Series A investment, have a look at the program. It's really a great opportunity to get high-level support in your investment search and direct contact to European VCs. We have an ongoing application platform, and as I said, the next cutoff is on May 20th. Connie Weber, our speaker today, has 30 minutes to share some insights and provide practical tips. She is an innovation and crowdfunding expert, working since 2016 for the European Crowdfunding Network. She also teaches financing innovation at the Danube University Krems in Austria. Since the start of her career, her work and research topics have been mainly related to innovative business models and alternative financing instruments. After her presentation, you will have 30 minutes to ask all your questions. You may already start asking your questions during the presentation in the questions window, but please make sure to be clear and concise when typing in your questions, so we are sure that we have enough time to go through all the questions. So, as usual, before we start with Connie's presentation, we would like to do a very quick roundtable to know who is our audience today. So we're going to launch the poll. First question. Please take a few seconds to tell us who you are. Few seconds. Okay, so 50% of the audience today are innovation experts, ecosystem builder. 30% are entrepreneurs not yet scaling up. 18% are entrepreneurs scaling up. Thank you. So we go to the second question. What is your experience with crowdfunding? Just a few seconds. Please take the time to answer. Okay. Okay. So 57% of the audience have no experience at all. 10% of our audience today have already invested via crowdfunding. 22% are considering it for current ventures. 6% have done a successful campaign, and 3% of the audience have had a failed campaign. Okay, thank you so much. So Connie, this gives you a bit an idea of the audience today. I give you the floor. You have until 4:30 to present. and we'll go through the questions afterwards. Thank you so much.
Hello. So ideally, you can now see my screen. Is this correct, Perrine?
Yes, we can see it. You can go ahead.
Okay, great. So welcome to this webinar. Thank you for dialing in and for spending the next half hour with us. I'm happy to tell you today a little bit about crowdfunding and also how you can use it. So my name is Connie Weber, as already introduced by Perrine. So what's the goal of this webinar today? So the goal is to understand how crowdfunding can be used as an alternative form of financing. We will shortly talk about how we see crowdfunding in the early stage financing ecosystem, also how it can be connected to other alternative or traditional financing tools. Also, we will present the different crowdfunding models and look which one can be more suitable for your next project. And I will also shortly highlight some aspects that are considered to run a successful crowdfunding campaign. And it's quite interesting to see that there are 6% of people who already run a campaign. So I would be happy to hear your feedback afterwards if this is true or if there is something else to consider or yes. So just a short introduction where I am working. So the European Crowdfunding Network is an industry association of the European crowdfunding industry. So our goal is to support crowdfunding platforms in Europe towards policy, towards visibility, towards awareness creation. So we do a lot of policy discussions, opinion building, and also try to find ways to create a transparent and trustworthy industry. So our members, so we have more than 80 members, and these are mostly crowdfunding platforms across all over Europe. So we have 16 different EU countries in our membership represented. We are a team of 7 people and organize 1 to 2 major conferences every year. So basically what we are doing is lobbying on the one hand side, so discuss with politicians that crowdfunding can be a serious and interesting tool to provide access to finance for SMEs and for startups and to provide an additional alternative source of finance. We do education like this webinar here or like our conferences. We do research, so we are involved in several research projects where we look at innovative ways of combining, for example, public and private money or integrating crowdfunding into different research domains. And of course, we aim also at a sustainable growth of the industry and create tools like, for example, a code of conduct. So what is crowdfunding and how does it complement other early stage finance tools? So I always like starting with a definition so that everyone knows about what we are talking. So crowdfunding has a quite broad definition. It's an emerging alternative source of financing. It refers to open calls to the public, generally via the internet. So one characteristic is that it's a call via the internet to finance a project either through a donation, a monetary contribution in exchange for a reward, a product pre-ordering, lending, or investment. So don't worry, we will discuss in this presentation about the different types of crowdfunding, so you will maybe understand better this definition later on. And any type of project can launch a crowdfunding campaign. So SMEs, these are small and medium-sized enterprises, artists, innovative startups, social entrepreneurs. So the target group of crowdfunding is also very diverse and very big. As you can see from this chart, The crowdfunding industry is steadily growing. So it appeared after the financial crisis 2008. So then there was a lack of finance for traditional SMEs or also for startups. So this is why crowdfunding became more and more popular. And since then, it's growing. So in 2014, 2015, most countries like Spain, Italy, Germany, so the leading crowdfunding industries, France, established national regulations. So from then on, crowdfunding was kind of legal, and especially the investment-based models. And since then, it's growing. So unfortunately, there are no real figures. So we use this source, which is a little bit outdated and does not reflect the whole industry, but the trend is quite obvious. So that the crowdfunding industry is growing, and we believe that it will continue to grow this way. So how is the crowdfunding industry represented in Europe? So as you can see from this chart, there are some countries leading and some countries that are far behind. What's interesting from all the volumes we have in Europe, the UK, which now is not Europe anymore, but the UK has a percentage of 70% of the overall volume. So when we talk about crowdfunding in Europe, we need to talk about crowdfunding in Europe with the UK or without the UK, as most of the volumes represent to this country, which is quite interesting, but what also shows that there is still very high potential in all other countries. So if we look what's possible in the UK to rise with crowdfunding, then it may also be possible in other countries. So far leading is the UK. Then Germany, France, Italy, and Spain have large markets too. We see in Europe that the Western countries have larger crowdfunding markets than the Eastern countries, but this may also be due to a lack of regulation in some Eastern countries, which is not topic of today. So this was just to give you an overview about how crowdfunding is developed in Europe. And so if you're in some countries, it might be harder for you to start a crowdfunding campaign than if you are in the UK, Spain, France, Portugal, or in countries where crowdfunding is more popular. So we think that crowdfunding is a nice tool to complement, but not to supplement traditional financing. So crowdfunding can be just another source of investment combined either with angel investments or with venture funds or also with grants or securities. It can be interesting. I like very much this the aspect that you can take it as equity for getting a bank loan. Some countries or some crowdfunding platforms and banks are working on this so that you receive a loan after a successful crowdfunding campaign. Usually to get a loan, you need some 25% equity. And this could be an interesting option, but also to create awareness for angel investments, or if you have an angel investor and you want to raise other funds. So there are different opportunities, and everything is possible, and you need to figure out what is the most interesting for your own project. But in principle, so to keep the message, crowdfunding is a nice tool to be complemented with other financing tools. Then crowdfunding has also some side effects. Maybe not all forms of crowdfunding in that way, and maybe not all campaigns or domains are suitable for this. But in principle, building a crowdfunding campaign or a successful crowdfunding campaign, raising funds, is building a community. So you create a kind of sales market already before you have maybe sold your first product. You can, through the video in the internet, communicating to your community, engaging a dialogue between different people. You can do active promotion for your new product or for your service. Therefore, it's a kind of marketing and PR tool. You can use it for branding. So many companies use crowdfunding to launch new products or to brand a certain product. It's also an interesting market analysis tool. So especially these kind of pre-sales campaigns, I will show some examples on the next slides. But you may know these pre-sales campaign on Kickstarter, where you can buy a product or where you provide some funds and then you receive the product. So this is a nice tool to test the market, to get early feedback from customers. So especially with innovative products or services, you can minimize the innovation risk through early user feedback, which can be quite interesting. You can also identify the customer needs and improve the product. So usually you see a lot of feedback and a lot of discussions going on, or maybe some discussions are started, which can provide you very valuable feedback. If you do, for example, a pre-sales campaign, you can use it as a distribution channel. And by staying in dialogue with your customers or with your crowd and community, it's also a kind of customer retention tool. So from a marketing perspective, crowdfunding has some quite interesting aspects or side effects. So now the interesting part, so which crowdfunding model is most suitable for my project or organization. You have already seen that I have talked about different kinds of crowdfunding. So in the definition, there was this donation, investment, and pre-sale. I also raised several times pre-sale campaigns. So we will now have a closer look at what different models we have in the crowdfunding industry. So basically we can differentiate 4 different types. The first one is donation, the second one reward, the third one is lending, and the fourth one is equity. The first 2, the main characteristic is that they do not have a financial incentive for the donor or investor. And the second and the last second, they have a financial incentive. So people who invest in these campaigns usually get something back or lose everything. So donation means it's just a donation contract. So basically, if you donate to a campaign, you do not get anything back. It's often used for charity purposes or for emotional purposes. I will show you an example too in a minute. Then reward, it's a crowdfunding campaign where you present your product or your service, and people can give you some funds. And as a thank you, they get a little reward. So this can be a t-shirt or a ticket for a concert or an event, but this can also be like mentioned before, the product already. So you can also use a reward-based campaign for pre-sale, for pre-saling your product. This can have some side effects as the ones I just mentioned, and you can also raise some money for the production. So this is why reward can also be very interesting for products. Then lending corresponds to the classical traditional finance banking loan. So lending-based crowdfunding is not very different to a traditional banking loan. Maybe it's less administrative and a little bit faster, but maybe also higher, so it depends. So lending is you get a loan, and people get for their investment some interest rates, and you pay back the loan plus the interest rates after a certain defined time. Equity-based crowdfunding is really shareholding, which can be interesting for the seed phase of your startup. So people who invest in your campaign, they get back some shares on the company, and therefore also some revenue sharing once there are revenues, or profit sharing. So I have now some examples. I have not the names of the crowdfunding platforms, so some of you might know the one or the other. I'm also happy to follow up, or in the discussion later on, to give some examples, but in principle we want to stay quite neutral. So the Nationbased crowdfunding is suitable for a wide range of domains. Basically, to raise some funds there, it has a tendency to be quite emotional, or to really tackle a social problem, charity problem, something like this. So this is one example from one platform where you can browse different categories, and then you see the projects, and can then donate without anything, without getting anything back. So this is an example for a Nation-based crowdfunding campaign. Then for a Reward-based crowdfunding campaign, this is also a crowdfunding type which is suitable for many different domains. As I mentioned, it's quite interesting for pre-saling your product, or for testing the market with a smaller amount. But you can also raise, especially through pre-saling your product, quite high amounts of money. And so this is a big reward-based crowdfunding platform where you also have different domains. And this is one example of a pre-sales campaign. So this company raised already, I think it's still running, 770,000, which is quite a lot of money, just through pre-saling. So one of the rewards is if you invest, for example, $299 or $399, then you get a package, or the kit of the product. So you can buy it and test it, and invest this way in the company. Then lending, there are a few big lending platforms, and this is the investor perspective. So if you want to invest in a company or on a lending-based crowdfunding platform, then you can choose between different countries. Not every platform offers this, as so far crowdfunding is based related to national regulations. So there are not many crowdfunding platforms that operate cross-border. This may change in the next year, because we will have a new law allowing cross-border crowdfunding, or harmonizing crowdfunding across Europe. So this is especially interesting for the countries that have not a big crowdfunding industry at the moment, or for the companies that live in countries with a small crowdfunding industry, because then it will be easier for larger platforms to expand in other countries, and to run also campaigns and lend people money in countries that are so far not reflected. Lending-based crowdfunding has also very different amounts. So there are platforms which really focus on small lending amounts, up to 50,000 euros. This platform focuses on amounts between 300,000 and 1 million. The duration is also quite variable. So you have below 3 years, or more than 3 years. And the score refers to the risk assessment. So depending on how risky the lending credit is, the interest rates might vary. So if it's riskier, then people will get more return, like for example 5.5%. And if it's not very risky, so if the probability that you get your money back is quite high, then the interest rates are also lower. So this is also interesting for you as a company. So depending on how risky your project is, or the likelihood that you will fail or manage to pay back the loan, the higher or lower your interest rates will be. Yep, this was back. So as a lending example, so for example here, just one project, 500,000 euros over 48 months with an interest rate of 5.5%. This is compared to banks quite high at the moment, but if you're not bankable, for example, it's the only alternative, and otherwise it's less administrative, and you may also get some investors who are your customers there. So you have the side effects too. Then equity is, as I mentioned at the beginning, quite interesting, especially for the seed phase, but also for any other phase. So when you really need to raise funds, and when you want to involve people as shareholders in your company, either through advice or just to involve them on the with the profits. You can go for an equity crowdfunding campaign. The biggest equity crowdfunding platforms are based in the UK. This is also a UK-based platform, but most of them operate also cross-border. So with equity and lending, we have the problem that so far it is not very easy for a crowdfunding platform to operate cross-border. And there are some who do, which are the bigger ones, and which have quite high experience. So here I picked out the example of the Hyperloop in Poland. So they are raising funds. And if you want to invest, or if you have a project that can be compared with this, so they are offering a certain percentage of equity. And seeking for a certain type of investment, and either you want to invest because you believe that this will create large revenues in the coming years, or you don't invest. So these were just some examples about what crowdfunding campaigns you can run. So what are some essential elements when you want to start a crowdfunding campaign? So first of all, it's important to find a suitable platform. So it may be most pragmatic to start in your own country where you're based, because we have a variety of European platforms. So I think we have around 500 active platforms, with different terms and conditions. Some are specialized on certain domains, some not. So especially in the health sector, there are some crowdfunding platforms that are only funding health tech companies, partly with European money support, and others are only focusing on mature SMEs and not on startups. Others are only focusing on startups. So you really need to figure out which platform to choose, and the best thing is to start in your own country. And then you need also to take into account several variables. So you need, of course, to choose the appropriate model. And also there are different business models on the crowdfunding platform. So you have to have a close look on all the related fees. So for some platforms you have to pay in advance already some money because they help you with your video and with everything. Some other platforms keep the fees based on the funds collected. So there are different business models of crowdfunding platforms which you should take into account. As a startup or SME, you may know the business model canvas, a quite popular tool. So you can also use this canvas as crowdfunding canvas, so to prepare your crowdfunding campaign. This can be a tool to help you to design a crowdfunding campaign that potentially is successful. So one important message is that a crowdfunding campaign should not be underestimated. So it's definitely not suitable for every project and for every SME and for every person, because you need to invest a lot of time. You are in the public, which is also not suitable to everyone. But yeah, if you want to go for it, then the crowdfunding canvas may support you. So to define your vision and motivation, the funding model, also which communities can you target. Maybe this also influences the platform selection, because different crowdfunding platforms also may have different communities behind. Also the cost structure and funding goal are important. So these are some questions that may help you structure your campaign. You will receive the slides afterwards, so don't worry, you can have them for the preparation of your campaign. Then crowdfunding is maybe quicker than a traditional bank loan or to raise funds through a grant, but it also takes some time. So you should calculate 4 to 8 weeks for setting up the campaign. Then the campaign duration itself can vary between 1 or 3 months, or longer, shorter. There are always some different differences, but in principle, this is the time you should calculate. And then you should also, so once the crowd has invested in your project, don't matter if it's a donation or equity-based crowdfunding, you should also provide some reporting. So what have you done with the funds, or what are you doing with the funds? What is running good? What is running not so good? Do you meet your expectations or not? Because of course, crowdfunding is a risky tool from the investor perspective. So the investor risks to lose his or her investment or money. And the better the projects perform and the better the platforms perform, the lower this risk is, and the better chances for further growth the crowdfunding industry gets. So what is also a checklist of success factors? This will be my last slide, so happy to hear your questions in a few minutes. So some success factors for a successful crowdfunding campaign can be distributed over different factors. So one is the project, the other one is the crowd. Communication is an important success factor, and the person may be one of the most important aspects. So from the project point of view, you should have a clear project description. So if you imagine that you have to describe your project in a 1 or 2 minute video, people really should get what's the added value, why should they support you. So it's you should be able to describe your project in a very precise and clear and short way. The project team is very important. As you may know from other investors, many people do not really invest, or do invest more in team than in the project itself. Story and innovation is important. So you need to tell a story. Graphics and video should also be professional, and reporting about updates and progress is important. Then the crowd has also variables to consider. So first of all, it starts with family and friends. It's also good to activate your family and friends at the beginning to start investing. Then crowdfunding often has a regional aspect. So people tend to support SME startups in their closer geographical area. It depends on the selection of the platform, because different platforms have different crowds and backgrounds, and also the funding goal and rewards are important, and transparency is of course also important. Communication, you need to strongly communicate your campaign if you want to make it successful. Ideally, you use different media tools, you combine off and online events. So you can, for example, plan your crowdfunding campaign together with a big fair, maybe not in the next 2 months, but usually when you have offline events, it's good to combine this. And the person is also very important. So you need to have an open mindset and personal involvement and really like what you do in order to be successful. So yes, this was my presentation. Happy to hear your questions, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Connie. Thanks for this very concise overview of the crowdfunding landscape. To the audience, you can already start asking, typing in your questions. Connie, we have a question regarding the list of all the platforms, the crowdfunding platforms available in Europe. Do you have a list somewhere?
As I mentioned, it's a list of around 500 platforms, and it changes very often because many crowdfunding platforms have either run out of business or have started. I think the best one is to, depending on in which country you live, to look for a national crowdfunding association, or also you can look on the European crowdfunding network on our side on the specific country section. But so far I do not have a list that I can share with you on crowdfunding platforms.
A biotech company, can you advise on how to do successful crowdfunding as a deep tech startup?
Yes, so with biotech, or with everything that is really research based, it's quite challenging, because you need to communicate in a good way the added value of your product or of your company. So this may be a challenge, but depending, so I'm not sure in which phase you are. So an equity crowdfunding campaign could be interesting to get some investments, and also then maybe to find some business angels that can support you. So often business angels track crowdfunding campaigns to look for next portfolio companies.
So this is also a question, do business angel and seed funds, how do they react when they have companies coming with crowdfunding, with crowdfunders on board?
So there are different aspects. So firstly, business angels and also VCs are often already investing via crowdfunding. So some business angels do make a crowdfunding campaign with their portfolio companies, and also venture capitalists are investing via crowdfunding in companies. And then there is often this argument that if you have the crowd as a stakeholder or a large stakeholder, then maybe a company gets less interesting for other investors. This can be maybe a case, but on the other hand side, it's also quite easy to buy out the crowd. So if you just offer the crowd investors their investment back, then they may be fine with this. Yeah, these are very specific questions, but so far we do not have many issues with this.
We have a question regarding the selection by the platforms. How do they select the project to be financed?
So this depends strongly on the platforms. There is no standard procedure, unfortunately. This is a thing we are working on, that platforms do good due diligence, because it's important that platforms check very good their companies in order to provide a kind of security or trust towards the investors. So the bigger platforms and the successful platforms, they do quite a good due diligence process. So they select the bigger ones mostly take most of the, especially in the lending field, they take most of the platforms. Equity, I don't know, to be honest. This may depend on the platform, but usually they check the company very carefully, but less administrative than for a bank loan. So it's, if you have a good company and good evidence on your legal status and everything, it shouldn't be a problem.
But more and more platforms are currently doing performing technical due diligence of companies, you were saying.
Especially in the investment based, and this is also important because in order to create trust for investors, you need to do technical due diligence, yes.
Connie, what are the maximum amounts that can be raised on crowdfunding platforms?
So I think this is regulated from law side. So I'm not sure on Kickstarter or Indiegogo. I am sure there are some crowdfunding campaigns that exceeded several millions, and in principle it's possible. As far as I know, in Europe, the current discussion is to allow crowdfunding campaigns without a prospectus, so that it's still a small investment up to 5 million. And some countries prefer 1 or 2 million. But yeah, so basically 5 million is maybe a good threshold.
Okay, and are there industry sectors that respond better to crowdfunding than others? What is your...
So basically the crowdfunding industry started with a creative, cultural and creative sector a little bit. And I think that, or we can see that there are maybe some crowdfunding models that are covered more by certain domains. So especially the cultural and creative industries, they tend to do more reward-based campaigns, while SMEs tend more to do lending campaigns. Tech startups tend more to do equity campaigns, but basically there's no one size fits it all approach.
We have a question from Maria asking if you can suggest a suitable crowdfunding platform for equity in Sweden.
For equity
preparing for medtech in Sweden.
MedTech. So I know one crowdfunding platform for MedTech, which is SQS, which is supported by the EIT, so from a European institution. I'm not sure if they act in Sweden too, but I think so. So SQS is focused on MedTech, and in Sweden, I think you have, but not sure if this is equity. So maybe Monar or Fundabeam, but I prefer not to rise names. So you can drop me an email afterwards, and I can send you some country-specific crowdfunding platforms. We know that they are big or more or less stable, but I prefer not to highlight specific ones.
Okay. We understand, and we will share your contacts and your presentations after the session. And as I said in my introduction, this webinar will be also available for replay on the investHorizon platform. Is there a minimum amount for crowdfunding, or?
No, so I think on a donation-based or reward-based crowdfunding campaign, you can, just raise something. Or do you mean investment? So this depends also on the crowdfunding platform. So you have some crowdfunding platforms that start with a certain amount. So, for example, the crowdfunding platform I just showed the example, they are very active in France and Italy. So they prefer do lending from 300,000 euro onwards, but there are other companies that focus on all loans between 10,000 euros and 100,000 euros. So this is quite different.
But when you set an amount, if you don't reach this amount, you don't get anything, right?
This also depends on the business model. So there are, especially in the donation and reward-based sector, there are crowdfunding platforms where you get everything that you collect. And then there are platforms which say, okay, you have to set a minimum amount, and if you don't reach the threshold, all investors get their money back. And if you reach it, you can get it, and you have to pay the fee. So this really depends on the crowdfunding business model, and this is different from platform to platform, unfortunately. So.
Okay, we also have questions regarding cryptocurrencies. Are there crowdfunding platforms specialized on this?
So basically, we are also looking or observing this very curiously because it's a kind of evolution of crowdfunding. So what we can observe, so at least from our membership, so we have some platforms that recently joined who are tokenizing SME shares, for example. So this is quite interesting. It's a kind of equity crowdfunding, but you do not get the shares, so you tokenize the shares or the profit sharing. And so this is one aspect. And then with regards to cryptocurrency, so there are some crowdfunding platforms that allow more and more investing also via cryptocurrencies, which opens somehow the market also to investors that so far have not been so active in the traditional financing scene. So there are some crypto investors who have money, maybe after the last few weeks not, but at least they had it. And so this is also an interesting development, but there is not much evidence yet.
One of our attendees is specialized as a culture organization and wants to know if you would recommend a platform specialized on which focuses on international artistic collaborations and enable him to do some video productions.
So this is quite a strategic aspect. As I mentioned, I cannot or I do not want to recommend certain platforms. So of course the bigger ones are Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or We Make It in the German-speaking area. It strongly depends on in which country you live. Then if you want to go for an international campaign or collaborate with international people, of course, it would be good to choose a large international one, such as the both US-based platforms I mentioned. If you prefer to stay in the European room or in certain countries, maybe platforms such as We Make It or something may also be interesting. And the problem or the threat with larger platforms is that sometimes the campaigns got lost because they have so many campaigns that it's quite difficult to raise awareness. But if you have a good community, then these platforms are maybe the best.
You mentioned international platforms. It's possible for do some platforms offer the possibility to invest in foreign companies, or is it changing at the moment?
So yes, this depends also on the crowdfunding model. So the donation and reward-based model, they are not affected by cross-border regulations. Basically, they can collect money from different countries. There is more the tax problem, but this is not a topic of this webinar today. And with the investment-based crowdfunding models such as lending and equity, as I mentioned, it's currently regulated by the individual countries. So some countries have a more open-minded regulation towards crowdfunding. Some countries are more restrictive regulation towards crowdfunding. And so far for crowdfunding platforms, it's difficult or not per se allowed to have cross-border projects, so either sourcing projects from one country or having investors from different countries. There are some platforms who manage this with a passporting license, which is quite expensive, so only the bigger ones and successful ones can really afford it. And as I mentioned, we will have from next year on a new European law, which is harmonizing the crowdfunding regulations across Europe. So cross-border crowdfunding platforms should be possible easier.
Okay. Connie, how do you see the future of crowdfunding? Is this a trend, or is this now very well established in the early stage innovation landscape?
I think it's still at the beginning, so we have made a huge progress. So it's becoming more and more popular, but it's also the case that many people are not really aware of crowdfunding or think it's just fraud or not interesting. But we can see the trend when observing the crowdfunding industry from the last years that it's steadily growing, that it's becoming more professional. So many platforms run out of business in the last few years because it's not very easy to get a sustainable business model as crowdfunding platform. But those who survived are really very professional and very good, and are a very good alternative for SMEs to raise finance or to get access to finance when banks are not serving them. So there more and more SMEs have the problem, or also startups have the problem, that they do not really fall into the category of the ideal banking loan because their risk is too high or because of other aspects. And for those, crowdfunding is a very interesting tool, and also policies recognizing this more and more. So the European Investment Bank, for example, has pledged high volumes into lending-based crowdfunding platforms to provide more liquidity to SMEs, which is a very interesting development. And also in the UK, this is why equity-based crowdfunding is so popular in the UK. They have very interesting tax incentives for investors because policy recognizes the importance of innovative startups and companies rising the company and needing some risk money to get started.
Okay, great. We are running out of time, so we have many questions, but I will take another 1 or 2 maximum. Very concrete question. What is the average duration of a crowdfunding campaign?
This depends. So I had it on the slide before. I cannot switch now, but so it's between 1 to 3 months. But this depends, of course. If you are looking for higher funds, then it might be longer. On the other hand side, on large lending-based crowdfunding platforms, it takes a few minutes until the loans are full. So it really depends on the platform. Yeah.
I will ask the question of Eva, who is wondering, she just got the Seal of Excellence from Horizon 2020, but no money. So is it the right moment to start a campaign, or should she go for grants, European grants? What do you think?
I think it can be really an interesting opportunity to start a crowdfunding campaign. We have been, or we are in discussion with the Commission to support more the Seal of Excellence companies, because we are aware that they have passed a very competitive process, so it's and that this might be interesting for crowdfunding platforms, and it's really the case. So crowdfunding platforms are asking us for a seal of excellence company. So yes, please. I don't know in which country you are, but depending on the country where you are, you should approach a suitable platform and get in contact with them, because they are also happy when they have a kind of.
Spain.
It's in Spain.
Yes.
Okay. So and then it depends on the model. So maybe we catch up via email, and I forward you.
Okay, thank you so much, Connie. I want to thank everybody for joining this session today. As I said a few times, you're gonna receive in the follow-up email the presentation of Connie, and our webinar will be tomorrow available for replay. I just want to ask you to give us a very quick feedback on the presentation of today and on the format of this webinar, because we do this every month and we really try to keep improving the sessions. So please give us a feedback in the survey that is going to pop up on your screen right now, and you can register on the next to the next event, 23rd of April, on investment readiness. And I wish you all a very nice afternoon. Thank you, Connie, and yeah, stay healthy and try to stay home. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.